Our 50s are such a pivotal decade in our lives. I think they're as important as our teenage years for self-development, and we change so much in the same way as we did when we were teenagers and we were working out who we are and who we wanted to be. As we hit our 50s, that process starts again. I was thinking that there are so many things in my 50s that I lost, but conversely, so many things that I found, so that now I'm in my 60s. Actually, I consider my 60s my best decade yet so far. So I was thinking about this, and I've come up with 5 things that I lost and 5 things that I gained. And I want to tell you what I lost and whether I think that that's permanent or whether it's something that we can claw back in our 60s or maintain as we're going through our 50s. And as always, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. So do comment, don't be shy. I read every single one and I reply to as many as possible. Excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. So the first thing that I lost as I was going through my 50s was my 2020 vision. You know that feeling when you're driving along and, the dusk starts to fall and suddenly things aren't as clear as they used to be. And you start thinking, the light's strange, isn't it? Or the headlights coming towards you are starting to dazzle you. I've got small cataracts in both eyes now, and driving at night is a nightmare because everything's doubled, or any glare is doubled. I actually see 2 moons. First time I saw that, I thought I was in some kind of sci-fi epic. But what really brought it home to me was when one of my grandchildren was born and I was holding this newborn baby in my arms, and I realised that even at this distance, her little face wasn't as clear to me. Her little eyes, nose, little mouth, they were just a little bit fuzzy. And that's what sent me off to the opticians and made me give in and get my glasses. Now, I know there are a lot of vitamins you can take and exercises you can do, but generally speaking, our eyesight does deteriorate as we get older. There is one good side though, of course, and you knew I'd find one. When you look in the mirror in the mornings, you can't see your wrinkles, can you? So, pluses and minuses. The second thing that I noticed that I was losing in my 50s was my flexibility. So I would sort of get out of a chair, and I go, "Ugh," as I got out the chair, or getting up and down off the toilet, especially, probably too much information, but a public toilet, sometimes they're so low, and I found myself holding onto the wall to lower myself up and down. Have you found that, or is it just me? Probably. But of course, again, with that, it is something that you can maintain and you can regain. Very much so. You go through periods where you're not as active, perhaps, and you lose flexibility. But what I've found is that your muscles have memory, and every part of your body has memory. So if you have gone through a period where you've started to stiffen up, you can, start your yoga again, and what have you, and you can regain an awful lot of that flexibility. I had a frozen shoulder in my 50s. Did you know that actually often happens during menopause? So, I had surgery on my shoulder. I couldn't reach round, I couldn't reach up, and, I'm like this now. I'm just showing off. The same with strength. We lose our muscle mass at a rate of 5% a year from our late 30s. So by the time we get to 60, we really will have lost a lot of muscle unless we keep maintaining. You might notice that everyday things like walking up and down the stairs, your legs are starting to feel weaker. You might notice walking uphill becomes more difficult. You can't really lunge the way you used to or squat. But small things every day can help you maintain that muscle mass and indeed can help you pull it back. It's really important to weight train in your 50s and into your 60s and beyond. It doesn't make you, bulky. It just maintains that functional fitness that we all need and that we're going to thank ourselves for doing those exercises when we're in our 80s and we're still mobile. So even if you are no longer mobile, you can still maintain strength in your arms and your upper body as much as possible. Don't give up. The other thing that I found that I lost was my sense of myself. Now that happened in my 40s as I started going through perimenopause, and it gradually came back through my 50s. But it's quite frightening when your life changes and you suddenly realise that you don't know who you are anymore. You've spent your whole life in a job or as a mother or as a wife. Maybe your marriage breaks up. Your identity is wrapped up with all these different roles, isn't it? And as your children leave home, as you lose a job, which is another loss, we'll talk about that in a moment, very often we start to think, well, who am I now? This was what drove me to start the midlife movement and what drove me to eventually become a coach for women in midlife and some men, actually. So if you need a little bit of help, feel free to get in touch. I'll put a link down in the description on this video. And the fifth thing that many people find that they lose in their 50s are jobs, careers that you've built over years, redundancies, or even if it's not a redundancy, a lot of people walk away from their 9 to 5 during their 50s. It's that sudden realisation that there's more years behind us than there are ahead of us. And is what we're doing actually filling us up? Is it lighting us up? Do we want to get out of bed in the morning? Or do we suffer from that Monday morning feeling, that hump day in the middle of the week and the thank goodness it's Friday feeling? And we think to ourselves, you know what, I don't want this anymore. You know, if you've managed to get yourself to a point where you can support yourself, it's not easy, is it? When you're still going to have to pay the bills well into your 70s and you need to support that with a job. But there are other things that you can do. And the 50s are a prime time for people leaving their jobs, using the experience that they've gained, setting up their own businesses, their own ventures, or even changing careers, going back to university. It's an exciting time of our lives. So those are the losses that I want to talk about today. Let's talk now about gains, what we find in our 50s that we then carry forward into our 60s and in order to be happier. I mean, for me, self-knowledge is huge. We've done all that self-development work through our 40s and 50s. We really know who we are by the time we get into our 60s. We know our tender points, we know our strengths, we know how to push through, we know our limits, we know our needs and we know our desires by the time we're in our 60s. Resilience. We gain resilience through our lives, and it's something that we can take into our 60s to bear the slings and arrows that might be thrown at us, whether that's with physical things like illnesses or other problems, or whether emotional things that we need to deal with. I do apologise. Very croaky. We've survived crises and losses, betrayals as well. We know we're going to survive. I find that I've been through things in my life that has built my resilience, but it's the small things that I don't have resilience for now. I'm sure that's a psychological trick where we go into fight or flight mode when we need to, and we can deal with the big things. But I find my resistance to the small things in life, like, you know, the plumbing going wrong or a leak in the ceiling or something like that. The other day we had 2 squirrels take up residence in our attic, and I found myself being really stressed by the whole thing. I didn't want them to be killed. I wanted to catch them and etc. Went on for a week, and I found that really hard to deal with. And I remember thinking to myself, well, come on, Joe, you've survived worse than 2 squirrels living above your head, making a racket, making holes in your roof. But it's those little things now that I find that I need to build my resilience for. So anyway, resilience is something I've found. What have you found? now that you're moving into your 60s, or you're going through your 50s and getting to that point of equilibrium, I can't say it, equilibrium, wisdom. It's a funny one, this, isn't it? Some people I talk to really own that word, and some really cringe away from it. And I must admit, I used to be somebody who really felt awkward about saying that I'd gained wisdom. It felt like I was blowing my own trumpet. And you know, we were brought up never to do that. But actually, if you think about it, the things that we've learned, the experiences that we've had, we know, don't we, that everything passes. We're able to give grace to others as well. We can empathise more with other people going through things in life without taking things so personally. We've learned, haven't we, to walk to the beat of our own drum, and we've learned when to speak up and when to hold our tongues. That's wisdom. Wisdom doesn't have to be this huge public thing. It can be a very quiet, gentle thing within us. And I think that we all have that by the time. We can still be foolish. And sometimes it's quite fun to be foolish, isn't it? But, you know, we have gained wisdom if we want to ever key into that. And of course, with wisdom comes courage. The courage to speak out, to speak our minds, to say what our needs are, to speak truth to power, perhaps. With courage and with speaking out, that can come as quite as a shock to those around us. So many times I see midlife women in particular being described as mouthy, or, you know, angry, or controversial, or combative. Somebody said to me yesterday that they're described as combative. And great. It's a shame that the world hasn't seen that side of us before, isn't it? And that we haven't felt able to express it. And finally, what comes from that is that many of us find the inability to give a flying fig about a lot of things that we desperately cared about before. Things like what the neighbours think. You know, I have what I like to call a natural garden. I don't like things to be very manicured, and it's quite overgrown, which I love at this time of year because it's full of wildlife. Once upon a time, I would have worried what my neighbours might think of my overgrown grass, or the wildflowers growing in my flower beds and so on. And I really don't care anymore. I don't care what people think of me. You know, I wouldn't be sitting here on YouTube and telling you my opinions on things if I cared. What do you think? Do you still really care what people think about you? It's a hard one to overcome. With all of these things that we've found in our 50s and into our 60s, they're not a one and done. They're things that we practice and that often come on us gradually. We might have an epiphany and think, hang on a minute, I don't care anymore about X, Y, or Z's opinion. Or we might gradually realise, I'm not getting as upset about this or that or the other. So they're my 10 things, 5 things lost and 5 things found in our 50s and going into our 60s. Join the conversation, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.